anger, rage, impatience, disbelief. These are the emotions I've been feeling for the past 5 years while I wait for Netflix's live-action adaptation of Avatar the Last Airbender. At first it was questionable if it was actually even going to happen, and over the years I've had my doubts.
You are too weak!
But as the time comes closer, we now know that it does exist and is happening.
Well, it's about time.
As of writing this, we seem to have all but an official release date at this point, but we do know from the teaser that it will be in 2024. This show was announced in an age where it seems like everything's getting a live-action version, and CGI technology is, for the most part, kind of getting better and better, so nothing seemed more fun than seeing one of the greatest animated shows of all time being reimagined in live action, and with one big upside as well. It was being led by original creators Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, so this was a very exciting time for the franchise and all the fans, but soon after, it all went to shit. Netflix gave Michael and Brian the boot, citing creative differences. A lot of fans were already skeptical because of the horror show that was the handling of the first live-action movie back in 2010. At a time when the franchise was getting something that most series never get, a second chance at a live action, it seemed Netflix was already off to a bad start with their decision making. Michael and Brian being removed from the helm was the turning point where even people who saw potential in the project were having second thoughts. On one hand, I can't say I blame them for thinking that, because there's a lot of mistakes that can be made, and Netflix seemed to be making their first mistake a big one. But at the same time, I like to ask bigger questions and understand why these things happen. Is it possible Netflix had a very good reason to remove them? Should we trust the professionals at Netflix, that they have the right counsel and know what they're doing? Cowboy Bebop got mixed reviews from audiences and critics. When reading critic reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, a lot of them seemed very consistent, with the ones who liked it mostly saying, just stop thinking about the anime and watch this as a show and you'll most likely enjoy it. Audience reviews looked a little different though. A lot of it was people hammering the lowest star possible to be able to give their complaints about how it's not the same as the anime. One guy proudly admitted that his rating of the whole show is based on watching the first 10 minutes and determining that it's not Cowboy Bebop, and that he didn't even watch the rest. Another person ranted that the show was just garbage for being different, and that the only parts they liked were the parts where the actors did or said the exact same thing as they did in the anime. These comments often speak for the masses when it comes to how people view these adaptations as a whole. They've already rated the show in their head before it even started. Netflix canceled Cowboy Bebop after one season, and although they have a habit of doing this for strange reasons, I can't help but imagine that if the show didn't get such bad reactions from audiences, the decision possibly would have been different. That's a sad fate for a show with loads of potential, and a sadder reality that the nails in the coffin are probably mostly hammered in by people who call themselves Bebop fans. The same sad fate that's become of this one, I could imagine also being a reality with Avatar. Netflix is dumping tons of money into this show, allegedly $15 million per episode, which suggests that they're really taking it seriously. But what do you do when you drop $100 million on a project and fans say they hate it and refuse to watch past 10 minutes? The higher payout means a higher risk, which means the show needs to deliver and bring a good return on the investment if we want to see it continue. Usually the reasons people have to hate a show they haven't seen yet are based on their fear of something different being released. But why does it really matter? Sometimes it's a big change, like a character being turned to a bad guy, and I can see that being a good reason, but other times it's just the pettiest shit imaginable. When it comes to Netflix's live-action Avatar, I've seen people saying years before the show was to air that it's going to suck because Suki has a mom now. You know, the thing that every human to ever live has had. A lot of people believe they have a good reason to hate the show that hasn't aired yet, based in the steaming pile of dog shit that was The Last Airbender by M. Night. Shame on him.
Yeah, I've been waiting to use that one.
And I see how that can be a good reason to at least be skeptical. I get it. The film was undeniably awful. I don't blame you for being afraid of what comes next. Here's the problem though. This isn't what comes next. This isn't a continuation of that work. This isn't that team. These are new people working on a new project with a new vision. There may be a few roadblocks here and there, but the evidence doesn't suggest that Netflix is doing this the same as it was done before. The movie was rushed because it was riding the hype train, and I don't think any actual thought was put into who directs it. Just slap a big name on it and push it out to get as much plays as possible while the show's at its peak still. The film also squeezed a whole season into one movie that wasn't even that long by today's standards. Netflix, on the other hand, took years just to cast actors and write out some of the story, and even now, years later, we still don't really know a whole lot about it, other than a few details that they've showed us. The movie changed damn near everything, it seemed, all the way down to the characters' skin colors, while Netflix has casted culturally appropriate actors who seem to fit the bill quite well. We have Gordon Cormier from Lost in Space as Aang, Guiowindio Tarbell from Annie with an E as Katara, Ian Ousley from 13 Reasons Why as Sokka, and Dallas Liu from Penis as Zuko. All of them share the proper race as their characters in the show. I was personally happy to see such a Giga Chad playing the Fire Lord, and the rest of them look just as good. All of this was done without the OGs involved, but they seem like shows of effort and care, and to me it seems like Netflix is really thinking this through properly and working hard to exceed the expectations and not repeat the mistakes of others. People are looking at this and saying they hope it doesn't even happen because they're still mad about the movie that was handled completely differently over 10 years ago. There's also the concern I mentioned about the original creators leaving production due to creative differences. For those of you who are mad about that, let me ask you something. What were the creative differences? You don't know, do you? I've seen a lot of assumptions, but we don't really know why they left. Who knows? I don't know. It could have been because Netflix wanted to make Aang have a dick tattoo on his head instead of an arrow. My guess is that this being a live action simply wasn't meshing well with their experience in writing animation. Michael and Brian are talented writers and creators, but they have experience with cartoons and animation. They don't make live action. The general fan base praises them and sees them as the only ones who can direct a good Avatar the Last Airbender series, no matter the form or media. So if they're not on it, then it's doomed from the start. But I wonder if it might be better without them. I expect to get a negative response from that question, but the source material is good and it's there, so if Netflix works off it, they can make gold even if they make creative changes. But the deeper question here is, why do people who call themselves fans want this to fail? I've seen countless people online saying they don't want it to exist at all, and that they want it to do poorly so it doesn't survive past one season. To everybody who I've seen talk shit about it, and even the ones who I haven't seen talk shit, but I know they're talking some kind of shit somewhere, I say,
I don't know what you're saying, buddy. Fuck you.
2 seconds after the live-action adaptation of One Piece was announced, people were saying the show was going to bomb because they gave Luffy shoes. Further down the road, I read comments that were honestly some of the dumbest shit I've ever seen for why people don't like it. Why are these expectations so far from reality? You're mad because the live-action version doesn't have a long-ass dick for a nose like the cartoon? And this is the real problem. People need to judge these shows over what they're doing as an independent piece of work, not how much it takes you back to the experience of seeing the original. And an adaptation change is a necessity, so I don't really see the point in being mad about it. That's kind of the whole idea. If you release something that's exactly the same as the original, what's the point of releasing it? Telling a story and making changes doesn't take anything away from the original. It only adds a new way to enjoy it. I don't really care for the 1950s Christmas Carol, but I think the 2009 version is okay, and oddly enough, I like the Looney Tunes version. I'm sure there's others that feel the exact opposite and only like the original, and that's fine too. As a kid, I used to always watch the Jungle Book cartoon, and that seems like it's been redone a dozen times, with some I like and some I could live without. When Shere Khan killed Akela in the live action, I was like, oh my god, but I didn't go and bitch on the internet that my childhood is ruined. Different story elements, details, and even minor changes cater to different audiences and resonate with different types of people. In a show with a lot of unique and diverse characters, you have many different stories to tell, and different types of fans have different favorite characters for different reasons. Isn't it the opposite of diversity to demand that a story only ever be told the way you like it? Is everybody supposed to enjoy the exact same parts and details as you? Is somebody less of a fan or their feelings invalid because their favorite character is Cabbage Man while yours isn't? Or because they like Haru's mustache and you don't? Make it make sense. The point of all of this is that changes are normal, and if the changes make sense, who really gives a shit? I've been really excited for this Avatar, as you can probably tell, but I'm kind of worried it will suffer the same fate as Cowboy Bebop, and I'm going to be left waiting for a second season that never comes. And I've even seen hella people flat out say this is what they hope will happen. Again, why do you want Netflix to fail? Is it because the original creators left and you guys think of them as gods, so you don't want an Avatar to exist if they're not creating it? I don't want to shit on them because, as I said, they're great creators and made one of my favorite shows of all time, but to date, they couldn't even strike gold twice in the animated Avatar universe. Korra was a good show, and I really like it and still do, but it's a far cry from the original Avatar. A lot of the original fans didn't like it at all. I only got the first set of comics because they simply didn't impress me enough for me to continue buying after that, and the search specifically was high-key ass and a huge letdown of an explanation for one of the biggest questions in the show. I'm not the only one who felt that way. A lot of fans agree with those things, and yet some of those same fans want to boycott Netflix's creation of the live action simply because those two aren't leading it. What if they're not around to do so at some point? Should this story that could last generations cease to exist if they never work on it again? Charles Dickens has been dead for 150 years, but his work is still being retold in ways that he could never even have imagined, and it's still good. Every new version of Avatar would just further solidify it as a classic piece of art, and I'm here for all of it. I want to see the show, and even if it's not as good as the original, that's fine. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be good in its own way. And if I see the first season, I want them to make the rest of them so I can see those too. For any fans who wish for that to not happen, I know another place you can go where fans won't help you.
Oh, you can all go to hell.
The hate for this project just sounds a bit unreasonable to me. Some stories are so good that they can be told many different ways and every version is good, even with the changes. Maybe to a degree it's simply being open-minded, but I'm always willing to embrace new things. Sometimes those new things are arguably better depending on the viewer. They're not taking away the original and replacing it, just expanding on the franchise by adding a retelling in a different form of media. Changing a character's motive slightly doesn't guarantee a show will suck. Pacing a live action different from an anime or cartoon doesn't make a story soulless. Thankfully, despite my worries, I don't think it will be tossed aside, even if a group of internet dimple dicks go and bad review bomb it, simply because there's been so much buildup and money put into it. And my only hope is that as long as Netflix stops shooting themselves in the foot, trying to drive fans away for other reasons, there will be enough money and enough hype put into this after the fact to finish the series, so we can have a complete live-action saga, and we can finally leave the mistakes of the past in the grave where they belong.